Welcome into Rounding the Bases, the podcast about culture and leadership with a baseball twist. I am Joel Goldberg, and the podcast is presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. Hashtag no stopping you. Enterprise Bank and Trust was founded by entrepreneurs with the core focus of serving privately owned small and medium-sized businesses who have a story to tell. Enterprise Bank's commitment is to listen, learn, and guide clients to a lifetime of financial success. Enterprise Bank and Trust. Together, there's no stopping you. It's the beginning of December as we are recording this and going live on YouTube and Facebook. And that means, first and foremost, I hope everyone had a happy Thanksgiving. Amazing that we're in the final month of this truly unique 2020. I am still coming to you from the Kansas City Audio Visual Studios. They create engaging spaces. Check them out at kcav.com. My guest today has a name that I think anyone, certainly in the sales world and the business world, knows and perhaps has an experience with. That's the same thing for me too. I don't know that I've ever shared this story on the podcast. I'll do it briefly in introducing my guest, but back in 2003, 2004, maybe, I was working in St. Louis, local news, before I moved into regional sports. And a buddy of mine owned a title company. And he said, hey, do you want to come work for us? You could sell during the day. You're not going into work until 2 or 3 every single afternoon. And so crack of dawn, I'd get in there and I'd go and sell to real estate companies or agents and different mortgage folks. I knew nothing about sales, nothing. I'd never lived a day in my life in that world. And I remember that they took a day off and had all the company go to a big event at the arena, and Zig Ziglar was speaking. And that was my first introduction to Zig Ziglar and all of what he did. I seem to be the only person in the world that didn't know it because I'd been living in the sports world. And, I remember just being completely fascinated. And I think I got the books or the tapes or whatever it was. And so Zig Ziglar was an institution in the United States. And that Ziglar name has been passed on. Well, actually, Tom Ziglar always had the Ziglar name, but he is now the CEO of Ziglar. And I'm excited right now to be joined by Zig's son, Tom Ziglar, the CEO of Ziglar. Tom, how are you?
Joel, I'm doing better than good, but that's like genetically required.
Yes, it's part of the Ziglar requirements. And, I wanted to read this too, because just even on your LinkedIn, it said, my belief, you can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. At Ziglar, we help busy people achieve true success through a one-step action plan. You have been surrounded by this your whole life. How much does it mean to you, that ability to help others?
That's really what it's all about. One of the things that's really interesting in this pandemic is, I call it the stainless steel handcuffs. And people are at home, they're going through all this change. Maybe their spouse lost a job and they're asking themselves, what's important? What's my why? Why am I here? And what I'm doing matters, and does it have meaning? And that's what we do at Ziglar, is we help people discover their why and step into that through, simple steps they can take. And when somebody calls you up and says, or sends you a text or an email and says, hey, this is what happened because of the information you shared, the content, the time, whatever it was, my life is different. There's no greater joy in the world than that.
Well, you've been, as I mentioned, you've been surrounded by that for your whole life. And, I wonder, in some ways, right, the Ziglar principles and integrity, that I assume has never changed, but the world has changed. And your dad saw that through all the years. Not every single year was the same. Maybe he wasn't out there speaking to crowds during a pandemic, but there's always disruption. There's always something that comes up. Nothing ever goes as planned. So how much of the principles and the identity of Ziglar remain the same, and how much have things evolved?
There's an ebb and a flow. The world gets caught up in whatever the flavor of the day is. And right now, I think maybe the biggest enemy has been distraction. So easy to get in the rat race, so easy to get wrapped into social media, so easy to just go through the motions. And we weren't built for that. We, as people, as God, as I believe, as God's creation, we were built for a purpose, for a reason, to serve others. And so this time of disruption, challenge, and change that we've been through has actually brought a lot of people back to the foundational Ziglar message. One of the things that it's kind of one of the silver linings is that larger companies and organizations are figuring out that quality of life equals quality of work. And it doesn't really matter whether it's a sports career or a business career or a teaching career. When people fall from a great height of maybe their champion status or whatever, when they have that cratering thing, it's usually not a profession issue that hits them. It's a life issue that hits them. And if they don't have that foundation in their life, then they're at risk. And so the Ziggler message has always been true, will always be true, because it's based out of God's wisdom. But I think people right now are more receptive to it than they were 10 months ago, for sure.
Well, people are looking for help. They're looking for inspiration. They're looking for a way. Nobody wants to suffer, obviously. I talk all the time on this podcast about how there is opportunity, but you've got to move forward. You've got to be able to adjust. That's so much easier said than done. I'm curious, and I'm sure many people have asked you this, but what would your dad have thought about this year?
I was, when it first hit and everybody went home, I kind of searched for that, what's the Zig quote that, is in the hundreds of quotes that he said that would really bubble to the top. And I found one that I think would be perfect. This is what he would be saying: expect the best, prepare for the worst, maximize what comes. And so in this time, what does it mean to expect the best? It means that, this is going to pass. We're going to get stronger because of it. We need to have our gratitude list out. We need to be a voice of hope and encouragement. How can we solve problems for other people? How can we serve them? But then we also have to prepare for the worst. So how do those two go together? Well, what that really means is we got to take care of the important things, our health. We got to sleep and eat and get the exercise. In business, we have to prepare and think, this might take longer than I wanted it to. And so we've got to adjust and adapt and make sure that we have the runway. And we do those two things: expect the best and prepare for the worst, for the last piece, which is maximize what comes. And what this really means is we've got to create the margin. And I know, we've had conversations, same as happened in our business. We used to do a lot of live events. I used to go and speak in the room, and all of a sudden those go away because people aren't gathering like they were. And so initially I had a pity party because I had this wrong thinking. I thought I was in the speaking business. No, I'm not in the speaking business. We're in the life-changing business. So we quickly adapted and we started doing everything online with webinars and other formats. And wouldn't you know it, people needed the message more than ever. And it's preparing our business for another phase. We've actually done well, but it's because we listened to our own teaching, which is once change happens, we've got to accept it as fact and embrace the present. And there's no better way to embrace the present than to look out to those you love and serve and figure out what problems they have and then figure out how you can help solve them.
You could go online and find a million Zig Ziglar quotes. One that I'll pull out that's relevant here is: the greatest of all mistakes is to do nothing because you think you can only do a little. And I think that there's so much that we could all do right now, whether that's you in terms of being a motivational speaker or me, same thing, or the podcasts, or whether whoever it is. I mean, there is something you could do. I tell people this all the time, Tom. There's something you could do every day to get better, to help, whether it's yourself, whether it's someone else. And it feels awfully good to have been able to lend a hand to someone else and make an impact with them. And so I always relate everything back to sports, not always, but we say so often in baseball, hey, you can go 0 for 4, you could be in an 0 for 20 slump, but did you help your team by playing good defense? Or did you did you support your teammates, being a good teammate in the dugout? There's something that we can do and find a positive every single day. And I think that that's a lot of what Ziglar's about, right? I mean, always finding that silver lining.
It is. And it's, we say this, Dad said this, to identify a problem is not negative. It only becomes negative if you only focus on the problem. So if you're in a hitting slump and all you do is focus on the hitting slump problem, you're going to drain yourself and everybody around you. Instead, what you've got to do is focus on the solution. So what does that mean? Well, you got to put in extra time. You got to get extra work. You've got to change your thinking. And part of that solution is, you know what? I want to be hitting in the postseason. I don't want to be hitting during regular season. So what can I do right now with what I have to elevate our team's chances to get to the postseason? And so we get very solution focused in what we do. And we also like kind of an incrementalism approach. There's always a little bit more. Dad called it BAM, which stands for, or it's BAAM, block in a mailbox. It's how he got in shape. The first day he ran a block. The second day he ran a block and a mailbox. The third day a block and 2 mailboxes. He kept adding a mailbox until he lost 36 pounds and got in shape. Well, we can apply that same principle to our personal life, our career, to our relationships, to whatever it is. And all that means is real simple. We might have what seems like an insurmountable problem in front of us. But if tomorrow or today I do a little bit, and then tomorrow I do a little bit more, and then the next day I add something to that, before you know it, we're through it and we have an advantage because we've grown through the change and we're better prepared to solve the world's problems when we come out.
I love the reference to the mailboxes because that's it. It doesn't necessarily feel like you're making a whole lot of gains until you look a month down the road, a year down the road, and see how far down the road you have gone. I need to hit a few more mailboxes, by the way, so I could drop some of those pounds. So I need to think about that one. We all could do that during the holiday season. Maybe not all of us, but many of us. So, Tom, I want to talk a little bit about your background because, I've always been fascinated, and I certainly see it in the sports world all the time, where you see these athletes and you watch their kids growing up. And even with my kids, I mean, my kids have to answer questions from friends all the time until they get to know me about, hey, your dad's on TV. What's that like? What's that like? And it's just this nonstop questioning of really what's normal. It's just your world. So what was it like growing up with that, with a very famous father in Zig Ziglar, in what I can only assume was just your normal, your everyday life?
Well, first off, like you just said, I wouldn't know any other way because that's my experience. I will say this, though, as good as Dad was on stage, he was even better off stage. He was just an amazing father, husband, just friends and family, just as kind and considerate and relational as you can imagine. And we were blessed. And the reason I say that is because of Dad's position and status, I got access to green rooms. And so backstage in the green room, whether it was the quarterback who just won the Super Bowl or, some other elite celebrity or athlete or politician, their celebrity's a little different. And this is what I mean. We would be out to eat. And when somebody would come to the table and say, Mr. Ziggler, can I get a picture or an autograph? It was almost always at the end of the meal, like they'd been watching to make sure they weren't interrupting. And then they would say, I want to share with you how you changed my life. And I'll tell you, Joel, it doesn't get old when people come up to you and say, you changed my life, and they share the story. And so that was my experience, being around other celebrities where people are just trying to get a photo that they can put on Instagram to say, look, I saw Terry Bradshaw or whoever it was. I have a lot of admiration for people who get tugged on constantly and don't lose their cool with the fan. I didn't have that experience because it was always a sense of gratitude. It wasn't because he was a star. It was because they were grateful for him. And then he always, when they came up, he gave them 100% full attention. And it was just, those moments were magical. So that was my example and my role model. And now when I travel and speak, when we get back to that, no matter where I go in the world, people will come up and tell me their Zig story.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, does this bother you? And I'm like, no, I love it. I want you to keep going because it just reaffirms what we're committed to. And the other piece is Dad would always end it this way. They'd say, you changed my life. And he would say something like this. He would say, well, thank you for saying that. But here's the reality. All I did was point out a truth that you took action on. And because you took action, you got the result. So I thank you for that. But just know that it was really you who changed your life. And so that was his humility. And that was another example that I had.
Well, it's got to be amazing too. I mean, I don't know that a man could possibly have led a more productive life than what your dad did in such a high profile way and impacting so many others, yet remaining so humble. And, you know, he's been gone, what, Tom, not quite 10 years, but I've got to think for you that legacy, not just Google him or anything like that, but that those stories continue to be passed on, and that everywhere you go, at least when things open back up again, you have the potential every single day to hear something about your dad that maybe you never heard before. That's got to be really an amazing feeling.
Yeah, you know, I call it the great grandkids scenario. Is I will talk to people now in their 20s, and they're like, "Oh, I love your dad," and I'm like, "Well, you never heard him speak live, so how did that happen?" Well, my father and my mom introduced me to him. Well, how did that happen? Well, their parents did. Well, how did that happen? Well, my great grandfather, back at the end of his life, heard your dad speak in 1973, and he, you know, and that's where it started. And so this lineage happens. We have the Ziggler Show podcast, which is close to 50 million downloads now, and we take audio recordings from Dad and we put it right in there. And the secret is real simple. He tells stories that you remember, and that's what you pass on. And so his audio is even more powerful than it was, I think, when he was speaking it, right? Because people have a place in their soul for the truth. And he was focused on communicating truth, not necessarily laughter or making friends or being popular. He was about getting the truth out there. And then he made it easy for people to like it when he did it. So that was his focus.
Well, it was a message that transcends time. It's a message that would have worked before his time. It's a message that works after his time on this earth. It's one that I assume that he could get up next year in 2021 if he were here and somehow make it relevant to a group, a generation that lives on Snapchat or whatever it is, right? I mean, the message still applies if some other things, even if some other things have changed. How about for you too? I mean, you were not just handed the, hey, here are the keys to being CEO of Ziglar. You had to work your way up like anyone else. Tell me about what those early years working for Ziglar were like.
You bet. I came out of college and my goal was to be a professional golfer. And then I figured out how good they were after traveling for a year. So I started working the warehouse at the company. Back then, we manufactured our own products. We shipped everything ourselves. And so I moved into manufacturing and then into sales. And when I got into sales, I just fell in love with it. You know, like a lot of people where you follow your first love and it doesn't work out. Mine was golf. I thought it was going to be just a really hard transition, right? Like always wondering, did I make the move? Did I do the right thing? But I realized that I'd given it all I had. And then when I started selling, I fell in love with it. And just the whole interaction, the whole serving people, and then having them call back and tell you their results. And so that kind of launched me into the realization that at our company, we weren't in the book and tape business. We were in the life-changing business.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved into management and then became the president and CEO about 26 years ago now. And we've been through the transitions. 15 years ago, we knew Dad wasn't going to be doing it forever. And then when he passed away just 8 years ago now, the personality of the company was no longer, it's personality driven business. So one of my friends told me, he's a great businessman. He said, it's harder to reinvent a business than it is to start a new one. And it wasn't that we had to change our content and our message. It was, we had to figure out a way to utilize the skills and talents we had. Dad said that one of his kind of prophetic things that he told us, me and my sisters, is he said, "You'll never know true freedom until I'm gone." And we didn't know what he meant. And then when he passed away, that realization hit, because we had all been supporting the company, the organization that he had created. And so we were taking our gifts and talents to support his. And so the freedom came, and also this like deer in the headlights look and ownership thought came. Wait a second. This thing needs to be built around our own gifts and talents, not somebody who's no longer here. And nobody commands the stage like Zig Ziglar. So I love speaking. I've got a different style. If I try to be Dad, people will know I'm faking it, right? So I've got to develop myself, and I've got to use my talents. And so we had to shift that, and we've done that. Now our focus is on developing and supporting and equipping and encouraging others who are focused on coaching, speaking, and training. And that's different than what Dad was. Dad was for the every person, right? He was for the sales professional, the business owner, everybody on a personal level.
And I'm sure that message, that had to have been hard for you when you were getting up there speaking. I mean, you knew him better than anyone, you and your sisters and your family, you knew him better than anyone. And I'm sure that it's that human element, human nature saying, I've got to not compete, but I've got to try to live up to those expectations to be able to live up to his name. And it has to have been, and I'm sure he would have told you, or probably did tell you, Tom, you got to be yourself. You can't be me. I can't be you. And I've got to think that some of that freedom you're talking about came to you when you understood that you didn't need to be Zig Ziglar. You needed to be Tom Ziglar.
Absolutely. And I'll just equate it to this. When I was in my early 20s. I think I was trying to qualify for the Byron Nelson on one of the Monday qualifiers they used to have back in the day. And I think it was Gary Nicholas. And he was also trying to, and he's Jack Nicklaus's son. And I remember thinking, I can't imagine the pressure that he has. I mean, just unbelievable. And he was an amazing golfer. But there's like one Jack Nicklaus. And so later on, when I started speaking, I'm not sure it was the same pressure, but I felt just an immense pressure as I got started. It wasn't fun. I enjoyed it when I was done, but the preparation, the turning gut and everything else. And to be quite honest, I had told myself a lie. In my head, I had told myself that people wanted me to be like my dad. And that's not true. People are more understanding, more forgiving, more realistic than that. What they wanted me to do was to represent the Ziglar philosophy, but to be the best version of myself possible, right? To bring my own skill, my own personality, my own gifts, and to hone those in, to know that somebody really cared when they got up there. When I got that straight, it changed it, right? It took that pressure off and by the way, Dad never put that pressure on us. He always said this. He said, whatever you want to do in life, I'm going to support you as long as you do it with 100% integrity and 100% effort. So he didn't care. He didn't say do this or do that. He said, whatever you're called to do it with 100% integrity and 100% effort. And that's so wise. And it's a good lesson for all of us.
Well, we get in our own way sometimes too, right? I mean, it gets in your own head. It's not in everybody else's head. And then you sit there and you take a step back and you say, wait a minute, there's some self-inflicted wounds here. We do that to ourselves, and then you realize everything you just said too. You can't ever go wrong with integrity and effort. Throw in authenticity, which falls in that same group there, and you're going to do well. And so I think that's true for every profession. Okay, time for the baseball themed questions brought to you by Kissick Construction. Trusted team, reliable partner. Check them out at kissickco.com. Tom, what is the biggest home run that you have hit professionally?
I wrote a book last year called Choose to Win, and we turned that book into a coaching program. And we decided to do it all online so that people could come in, get licensed to coach our material. And we started at the end of November of last year. And lo and behold, the pandemic hit, and it was the only thing you could do. And so this thing has really, really turned out to be super powerful, and it's changing lives at the same time. So that's like that perfect home run, right? It's not just a home run; it's hitting it in the bottom of the ninth, right? So that's it right there.
How about a swing and a miss? And what did you learn from it?
Oh, the biggest, and this would be like striking out in the bottom of the ninth. 3 years after I became CEO, I was 33. I had this brilliant business idea to start a new company, and Dad wanted to do it. So I'm not, he would never give me full credit for it. He would take responsibility. So we spent all this money and we started this company, and we ended up shutting it down within a year. And we lost $2.5 million in that time. And I went to bed. I went to bed every night thinking, Dad built his reputation over a lifetime, and I ruined it in 9 months. That was the burden I was carrying. Of course, Dad kept telling me, no, it's going to be okay. And it was okay. And so I learned a couple of things there. One is you never start a new company on the back of a successful company, right? You've got to separate the two. And I had we had 7 or 8 consultants, and 7 of them said, your only risk is not being prepared. You need to scale up. You need to invest in inventory. You need to have a software system that can handle all the growth that you're going to have. One consultant said, you know what? Why don't you take it slow? If this grows faster than you can keep up, we can make that a fantastic story. So I think my ego got a little involved, and we listened to the 7 instead of the 1. And I look back at it and go, you know what? If we'd listened to the 1, we'd have been fine. And so we've got to really, even though I don't think anybody was trying to manipulate or do anything, we've got to really look at, okay, what's the upside? What's the downside? What's the risk? And understand that incrementally growing and getting stronger and serving every person you come across, that's a much better goal than how fast can we grow. And I think that was a mistake of youth.
We make those, and then hopefully we learn from them, which obviously you did. The final baseball themed question, and I'll start to remind people now, have been reminding people, that my new book is coming out this month called Small Ball, Big Results. So what is small ball to you, Tom? What are the little things that add up to the big things?
Oh my goodness. This is a principle. The book Choose to Win, the anchor quote is this: the fastest way to success is to replace bad habits with good habits. And what I really advocate is don't even look at the big bad habits and the big good habits. Instead, just take a little bitty bad habit that's holding you back from where you want to go and replace it with a little bitty good habit. And a simple example, and you can find them in all areas of life. If you drink a soda or a soft drink that's got sugar in it, if you drink that every day, if you just replace one of those with a bottle of water, everything else stays the same. In the course of a year, you'll lose 17 pounds and you'll consume 44 pounds less sugar. And that's such a little thing. And what we've got to understand is the way we're wired is it's not good enough to just get rid of the bad habit. We have to replace it with the good habit because there's a void there. And so to me, that's the ultimate small ball. Is it's looking at where I want to go, understanding what's keeping me from getting there, and just slowly whittling away by taking away the thing that's keeping me from getting there and replace it with the thing that'll get me there.
It's back to the mailboxes. It's the same concept, those little small gains and habits, forming those habits every single day. Before I get to my 4 final questions, Tom, just wanted to pass on a message that came in that I think you'll appreciate. I know you hear many variations of this, but it comes from Frank Clay Jr., who is the local chapter president for us here in Kansas City of the National Speakers Association. And Frank says, I have the brown pages of Zig Ziglar's Secrets of Closing the Sale in my hand. Thank the Ziglars for the wisdom that few would ever share. I was always in the top 10% of sales because of Ziggy. And I know that there are thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people that feel the same way. So just wanted to pass that on. I know you've heard it. I know it never gets old. Let me get to the 4 final questions now. And let's start with that. First question, the name Zig. There's no other Zig out there. There was just Zig Ziglar. How did he get the name Zig?
Well, he was the 10th of 12 kids, and every one of his brothers' names started with an H. Hillary Hinton Ziggler was Dad's given name. He had Horace, Houston, Huell, and Huey, and Hubert as brothers. So Dad said, when your name's Hillary Hinton, your friends start giving you a nickname, which was Ziggy or Zig. And so that nickname kind of stuck to him. And then when he started speaking, maybe that's the greatest stage name of all time. Zig Ziglar.
It has to be. Everybody knows that one. Okay, second question. Let's talk more about those PGA aspirations or former PGA aspirations. I don't know if you're going on the senior tour or anything like that, but what was your golf game like as you were at least considering pursuing a career in the PGA?
So I played college golf at a non-scholarship school. And so I really didn't take it seriously until like my freshman or sophomore year of college golf. Junior year, I started working with Hank Haney and playing. He started changing my swing. My handicap, I think, got to a +3, which, but I never had the low gear. So I'd shoot par, break par, but I could never do like the 63. And once I started competing at the highest level, well, not on tour, but at the level just below that, it became pretty obvious that you've got to have that gear. It's unbelievable. So that was where I was. I asked Hank, I'd been working with him for a couple of years, and I said, how long before I legitimately know whether I have a chance or not? Because we were rebuilding everything. And he said 3 more years. And I went to a tournament in Maumelle, Arkansas, and I remember there was a par 5. It was about 530 yards, old technology. So this is the old, woods and everything. And I hit driver 3-wood 5-iron to the green. And I'm in the clubhouse, and it was wet. Okay, it was wet, so everything was plugging. And somebody says, "Hey, did you hear that kid hit that par 5 and 2?" And I'm like, "No way." And it was John Daly. And so I think John Daly was my wake-up call.
Good story. It's definitely a good story. Okay, third question. We mentioned a couple before, but do you have a favorite quote from your dad among the 1,000?
Yes, I actually have 2 favorites. One is this. You are what you are and where you are because of what's gone into your mind. And you can change what you are, and you can change where you are by changing what goes into your mind. So that was a life changer for me. We've got the choice to put into our mind. I have my own version of that. What you feed your mind determines your appetite. So that's my version. But my favorite of all quotes was this. At the end of Dad's life, he had Alzheimer's. And so, there are good days and bad days. And so he was having a good day. And he said, "Son, have you heard my favorite quote?" And this was a saying that he would repeat over and over, and as the family would all say, "No, Dad, tell us," right? And whatever was on his heart that day, that would come out. And so he told me this. He said, "Son, God don't make no junk. And thanks to your mother, neither do I." And I could see the wheels turning in his eyes and in his heart when he said it, because he actually took two quotes and put them together just for me. And so when he said that, I'm like, well, that's it. There's never going to be a better quote from Zig Ziglar than that, because that was for me.
Fantastic. What a blessing to have that. Last question, the walk-off. We talked a bit about how life has changed and how life has changed for Ziggler as well. What does the future look like? Everybody is making their adjustments and pivoting. The world we know will never look the same as it did, say, in 2019 or entering 2020. Thank goodness for technology and video, for better and worse, I would say. What does the future look like for Ziggler?
I have to tell you, I am extremely excited. Extremely excited. And there's a couple of reasons why. Number one, I've always believed, like Dad believed, that success doesn't depend on what happens out there, right? It's not the government. It's not the business climate. That doesn't determine my success. My success happens between my own two ears. So that's the first one. The second one is people have had a reality check on what's important. I mean, it's pretty obvious. We've been lied to. I mean, I don't care if you're Democrat, Republican, liberal, or conservative. We can look at all of them and say they've been lying to us. The media's been lying. Everybody's been lying to us. And so what does that do? It makes it easier for when the truth finally comes in to go, that's what I'm looking for. And so with this kind of reflection time and the reality that I'm taking the stainless steel handcuffs off to go do what I'm supposed to do, people are seeking the truth. And at the end of the day, the truth revolves around serving other people. So how do I become the person God created me to become so that I can ultimately serve God's children? And I think more and more people from all sides, all spectrums, all backgrounds are starting to migrate towards that. I see it in large mega corporations too. It used to be about growth and production and profitability and the stock market. And now their number one concern is the mental health and well-being of their people. That wasn't being discussed on a broad scale in corporate boardrooms, and it is now. And so what does that mean? Well, what does the health and well-being of my people mean? It means that they've got to have a sense of a balanced life. And so what I'm seeing is quality of life equals quality of work. And when business leaders start to understand that the better quality of life you have, the work is just going to be a natural byproduct of that, that changes the focus. Well, what makes a good quality of life? Relationships, mental, spiritual, physical. Well, we're going to start having the right kind of conversations around those three areas. So I'm excited.
It's always about people. It's no matter what you do, no matter what profession, no matter who you are, where you are, good times, bad times, it's always about people. I know that's very simple, but start there to me, Tom, and that's a great way to go.
Yep, two quotes. The one behind me on my screen, you can have everything in life you want if you help enough other people get what they want. That's Zig Ziglar. And then Rabbi Daniel Lapin said this: God is never happier with his children than when they're solving the problems of his other children. And those are two quotes to live by, and the world needs that now more than ever.
No question. Couldn't agree with you more. I hope everyone will take inspiration from it. I certainly have. I took inspiration from some of what you shared with me when we talked last month, or maybe it was the month before now, at this point, as we're early in December. Tom, can't thank you enough for spending the time, for sharing your insight, for sharing your father's legacy. I know that it means so much, and you guys at Ziggler will continue to do that for perhaps generations to come. So thanks again. People probably don't need to know because they already do, but just in case, you could find out everything you need to know about the Ziglar organization at Ziglar.com. Tom Ziglar is the CEO. Thanks for spending the time on Rounding the Bases.
Thank you for having me on.
All right, great to visit with Tom Ziglar, and that's going to do it for another episode of Rounding the Bases. Shout out to my sponsors, Kansas City Audio Visual, Kissick Construction, and Enterprise Bank and Trust. Businesses often come to Enterprise Bank because they demand and, frankly, are worthy of more than the status quo and need a local partner who understands their business. Hashtag no stopping you, Enterprise Bank. That is going to do it. Appreciate you watching or listening, and hope to catch you next time on Rounding the Bases.